All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another developing stream. We're gonna do some planning today. We're just gonna plan out the chemistry system, engine system. I don't know. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's a matter of its purpose, its utility, its function. We're gonna get our obsidian on today. Okay, is this the perfect camera angle? Yes, it is. Yeah. So that is the plan. I should probably open Obsidian up or find the directory where it is located, where the vault is located. Let me see. Let me look. Toolsets. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, but I can't actually open Obsidian that way. Silly me. Well, it should already be open once I do it like this. Yeah. Right? Yeah, so we gotta figure this out. We need something that's actually coherent. Oh, but I guess I could show what I have with the game so far. So, yeah, I guess I have to explain something. I said in the last stream that I'd probably have the Steam page ready by this stream. That is what I said. Sometimes, okay, when you put every ounce of yourself into something, you try to get something done by a certain time, you can, put in all the effort and the results will still not yield, okay? This is a life lesson, okay? And the response in those moments is to know that you are headed in the right direction and to keep going. Sometimes you can't just get it done when you need to. So here's the Steam page. It's up, it's ready, it's done. Now I need to market it. So I made a YouTube short on a YouTube channel. It did not amazingly, but I did just post it yesterday. So I gotta keep innovating. And I was like recording voice lines, and I felt like a schizo, just like talking to myself. But I mean that's the process, right? I mean I have to pass the skill check and not let the cringe stop me. So yeah, I'm trying to make shorts for that now to promote it. Hopefully this time the shorts are actually like successful. I'm trying new things. We'll see what happens. I'm going even further beyond for my next short. I'm gonna make it even more algorithm refined. I'm selling my soul. I'm selling my soul to the YouTube lords. Is what. Well, I also TikTok, Instagram. I'm selling my soul to the social media lords. The overlords. That's a better word. Yeah, I'm selling my soul to the social media overlords. So that's the plan. It also means that I kind of need to I've kind of started incorporating a workflow, an off-stream workflow into the whole process for this game, like the marketing stuff I'm mainly doing off-stream. And as such, it's becoming increasingly impractical to do development streams exclusively while or to do development on the game exclusively while I'm streaming. It was kind of a nice challenge, I guess, but it didn't really serve any actual purpose, except for maybe like at the end of it, I could have just said, "Oh wow, look, I made this entire game on stream," which probably not worth it. So what that means is I will still do the bulk of the development on stream, but if there's like a feature I need to make, so I can like show it in some way for the marketing, or I just really need to get something in, I will add that. So I've actually made a couple tweaks since the last development stream. Nothing really major. I basically just adjusted some parameters. I might have adjusted the biomes a little bit. I fixed a bug that was happening with like the shaders not working when you apply upgrades. Like it would toggle between the shaders working and not working. So I fixed that. I basically just made it more functional. Yeah, this is to say that I will start doing some stuff off stream if necessary. So yes, there's that to consider. Maybe if I have to do something very major, I can consider opening up stream for that. However, I do feel like I focus better when I don't have to also focus. I feel like I focus better on the development side of things when I don't also have to focus on like doing commentary and talking. Uh, so I might make some of the music off stream because I feel like with music, the more I can focus, the better the outcome is there. It kind of frees up bandwidth in my head, so I can actually like think of what I want to add to the song. Um, but for something like a programming challenge, which I only have to think about it so hard to find the solution. That's probably something I can do on stream. Yeah, these are just considerations that I'm making. I definitely think I'm more focused and productive off stream. So I think there's like a time when it's good to stream and a time when it's not good to stream, basically. And yeah, as the game has progressed, as the game has sort of gone on in its development, it's become increasingly more of like a. I know I mentioned this before, but it's becoming more of like a full game, like something I'm releasing on Steam, not just like an itch. Not just like a portfolio project anymore. I'm not just gonna release it on itch.io, but also on Steam. So, yeah. And of course, I'm gonna have to, support the game for a very long period of time, I would assume, because it's turning into that sort of thing now. Uh, but yeah, I mean, if no one plays the game and like I'm trying to move on to something else, like a different project, it's probably gonna make me, less focused on making updates for it. Like there has to be a reason. So, so yeah, these are just like I've been like thinking about the game, everything surrounding the game since the last stream, and these are just sort of the things I thought about. Yeah, today what we're gonna do, the thing we're actually going to make on the stream, we're going to devise a plan for the chemistry engine. How do we want it to work? And we already have some stuff here. There's a couple things I need to fill in though. I kind of just want to. What if I don't want to update right now? Okay. I kind of just want to go through some more examples to figure out what I need. Um, yeah, like right now the three parts of this system are what we have, like the forms, or I guess it's 4 parts. No, 3 parts. Forms, energies, and elements. I think I think what I should do. The examples based way of creating the system is helpful because I think it provides like the best um analog, I guess, for something I'd actually encounter when I go to implement it. So I might, to simplify it, I might just start with the forms. I might just have the forms and then run through a bunch of examples like energies and elements. These might be able to join these together in a way. But I also wonder like how I'm going to store the energies on each instance of the different elements as forms. Like if it inherits from node, right? I can do that fairly easily. However, if it's like a tile, well, then where do I store that, you know? Like, am I going to make an object instance for every single tile? Probably not. I probably don't want to do that. So yeah, it's something I'll have to think about. Maybe another thing. Maybe we can actually start turning this into like almost more like pseudocode. I don't want to say somewhere in between here and pseudocode, basically. So actually start laying out like the object oriented hierarchy. Um and like clearly define the function and relation of every single part of this system. So, what am I actually going to do? Guess I could include pseudocode in certain parts. I mean, only as long as it's useful. Okay, yeah, let's make a new canvas. It is a new canvas time. I might go back and borrow some of these examples. Chemistry V2. Okay, so let's start with, how do I do a header? Oh my god. Double dash? No. It's a hashtag. Okay. Hashtag form. And I also feel like we're going to be replacing parts of other systems like the tile profiles. Or maybe we could attach the forms to the tile profiles. What's up, Dino? Welcome back. Glad you're back. And I am actually going to copy the other forms. How's it going? Oh, geez. It has been a weekend for sure. I've been working on a lot of stuff. Um, it's been busy. Whoa. Yeah, so I got to think about how this is all actually going to work. So I feel like solving the problem with, individual values on uh, tiles will be simple enough. I mean, we could probably just use the CPU data thing for that. I'm trying to figure out what else I want to do. So yeah, maybe I should sort these into like an object-oriented kind of thing. So let's give these a description as well. Represents volumes. Represents what does this represent? Recently I've gotten Minecraft and right now I'm building Lego. That sounds cool. You recently got and you're building Lego. Oh, I thought you were like building Lego in Minecraft, but no, I think you're just building Lego in real life, which is also cool. These are both cool activities. Yeah, what does this do? So it could be like a cloud or like a thing of gas, like a gas tile. Okay, I think I will use volumes. It represents volumes of stuff. Wait, oh no. Is the ads manager on it? It's not. That's incredible. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm just gonna wait until the next ad break. I'm gonna wait until the hour mark, run an ad, but I forgot to turn the ad manager on. This is so awesome. Represents volumes and separation of elements. Represents volume and compositions. No, and separation. I'm gonna say separation. You know, yeah. I'm building whatever I want right now. I was building mechs, but now I need to make a little. Or now I need to make a base for little characters. I like to call. I need to. I'm learning this new word. Cublians. Cublians. I feel like it's gonna be Cublians, which has a nice sound to it. Nailed it. I should become an etymologist or a pronunciologist, which is a real profession, by the way. Sounds cool. Represents volumes and separation of elements. Also defines behavior. Oh, jeez. Oh my god, this is like a whole thing. I made them like 4 years ago. Uh, they are 10 blocks, but with faces. Little green blocks. 4 years ago. They're base 10 blocks, but with faces. Little green blocks. I see. Dang, and they've survived. They've survived for 2 or 4 years. Impressive. Yeah, so the forms should not. I feel like the form should not define all of the behaviors. Because, like, if you have like lava next to wood and there's any sort of oxygen in the system, the wood should ignite. And I don't want to have to recreate that behavior on every single form whenever there's wood and enough heat, I should say. So I should probably switch up the example. So whenever there's wood and heat and oxygen, sufficient heat, I don't want to have to define that threshold for every single form whenever it has that element. So it kind of can't define every single behavior here. But then with like the stuff rising or whatever, maybe the behavior should be all defined in the elements. Oh my god. Perhaps. They even have enemies, the Bluians. I see. Bluian? Ah, the Bluians. They're blue foam squares with faces. I don't understand anything you're saying. Yeah, you would have more context if you watched the last stream, but basically what I'm doing right now, Dino, is I'm planning like a chemistry system for the game. So like fire can mix with wood and create more fire, that sort of thing. So yeah. Okay, now I'm kind of like liking the idea of the elements like defining all the behaviors. And then the forms manifest the behaviors. So, for example, element could output some sort of velocity change, some sort of upwards mechanical force, some sort of force, and then the form will implement that, essentially. Yes, I like that. I like that. this can work, because then we can create an object hierarchy structure for, or maybe I will do something else. Maybe I'll do like some more composition stuff, but we could do that for the elements instead. So now every element is going to be coded, and then it'll all be unified with the outputs in these, the forms will utilize the outputs of the elements in different ways. So for example, if gas rises in a balloon form, it just goes to the top of the balloon. If it rises in a tile form, well, it will just disappear because it goes into the atmosphere, and then what we just say it like dissolves at that point if it rises. Um, and we could implement like all physical behaviors in the elements. So for example, we could have a very high up class which basically checks for like other things around it, other elements that it's mixing with. And if it's denser, then the current thing will go up or something. You want to know something cool in the Cublians universe? Yes. Also gas. Like oxygen, smoke. Smoke I'll just treat as a gas, even though technically I think it's like something else. It's like a vapor. I don't know. Hydrogen is usually found as a gas as well. What other gases are there? I think nitrogen can be a gas. Carbon dioxide. Etc., etc. They collide with other universes. Perhaps, perhaps. Oh, the Cublians universe. Universes, they collide with each other. Does sound like an interesting world-building event, for sure. What would happen when a universe collides with another universe? What would go on there? And we're not talking about just galaxies, right? We're talking about universes, which are like their own things. So the rules, assuming they have different rules, the rules would mix together and create some sort of modified whatever. It's like a Venn diagram of universes. And then in the middle, you have like a bunch of crazy shit going on. Excuse my language. All right, so I'm going to add this into the plan, the outline. Also defines implementation for elemental behaviors, yes. For elemental responses, for elemental outputs. Elemental behavioral outputs. That is a mouthful. It's more of RP/Lego things. I made that team up. /Lego things I made. Like the universes are Lego things that you made? Is that what I'm hearing? Also defines implementation for elemental behavioral outputs. Also defines implementation for elements. Please. What is this? This UI form thing? This is called Obsidian and is helpful for like planning things. Getting your thoughts organized. Welcome to the stream. I am planning a chemistry engine for my game where you play as a dragon. Like there's one where I exist and now I'm part of the Cublians, and there is one here is this guy with a yellow cylinder head who wields a staff and a baby raptor. That is what's the phrase? That goes hard. That is what I will say in response to that. You could turn this into a whole IP. Okay, you could turn this into a whole library of media. Yellow cylinder head wields a staff and a baby raptor. Does the staff do anything? Does it give him powers, or like does it cast spells? Does it create Legos, perhaps? So now I'm kind of thinking that we won't need as much like branching here for the forms. Why though? Why is that the case? Well, I guess there's just less like varying functionality now. Yeah. I don't know. All I know is the crystal on the staff is powerful. Crystal on the staff is powerful. Well, you gotta start somewhere, right? You have one piece of information. Alright, so I'm gonna start breaking this up into an object-oriented hierarchy. So we can still kind of, I guess we can break things up here. Yeah. Um, you know what? These can all be our base types. Yeah. We'll also have one unified type. So form is going to be here at the top. And then under that we'll have tile form, atmosphere form. Wait, what is the difference between a weather form and an atmosphere form? Right, weather doesn't go inside. Yeah. Huh. Maybe I should include that in the weather form as well. I'm going to call it weather form. We'll combine the functionality of both of those. I think it'll be manageable enough. The guy who holds the staff used to have a plane with a laser that drops down that uses the power of the same crystal. Let's just say it crashed. And a bird just hit my window. That is unfortunate. With a laser that drops down that uses the power of the same crystal. Wait, so it does have like a purpose. Or wait, am I reading this correctly? The guy who holds the staff used to have a plane. He used to have a plane with a laser. The plane has a laser that drops down that uses the power of the same crystal. Okay, so it can create a laser. Let's just say it crashed. Okay, it crashed, so that's a lore event. Hope the bird is okay. I hope the bird is okay as well. Particle form. Should that be a type of node form? That should probably be a type of node form. Yeah. Might even be able to include the particle behaviors on the particle. We might be able to inherit from particle. Wait, no, we can't. I don't think we can. Actually. Used to have a car that also crashed. Crashing a lot of vehicles. Would there be anything that inherits from weather form? Not necessarily. Tile form. We might not. We also might not have anything that inherits from tile form. Yeah. However, I have another thing in mind to inherit from node form. Oh wait. I was thinking about making container forms, but those would also apply on tiles. Which we could do that. We could manage that. It's just going to be a little bit of repetition. Yeah. Unless we define the separation somewhere else, which I suppose we could do. What if I call this rigid body form? And I call this particle form? Yeah. Is there any other kind of form we would need? No, not really. Okay, so this is just going to represent... Why don't we just say defines implementation for elements? Or how about defines the consequences? Defines consequences for elemental behaviors. Implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Okay. Should I give this a different name? No, I think form is probably fine. Yeah, so with rigid body form, it could rise up somehow. If the velocity went up with particle form, it could dissipate weather form. If it's rising up, I am not sure. Or maybe with tile form and rigid body form and particle form. Or no, this is rigid body form. If there's gas coming out of it, I feel like it would be different. Jeez, I don't know. Okay, I think the next thing we'll want are systems. I'll call them systems. And this is basically going to store the amounts and separations of elements. Also, he's the first guy ever made who at one point vanished. All that was left was his staff and raptor. With no wielder, the staff made universes collide. It found a new wielder, but during it, the crystal disconnected and flew away, and so the Cublians got hold of the staff and raptor, but didn't know how to use it. Then one day he came back holding the crystal and got his staff back, aka I lost him. Other than his staff, and raptor also lost the crystal. It's a lot. You could fill a book. You could fill a book with this information. The Chronicles. What kind of systems do we want to have? Oh, now there can be like a weather system. Oh my god. Wait, that's not true. The systems can be nested. Systems should be able to nest within each other. I will make a Google slide and fill it with lore one day. Make a Google slide and fill it with lore. You should do it. I would say do it. Be cool to see. All right, what kind of systems would we have here? And when I say the systems can be nested, I mean they can reference each other, basically, like in nested fashion, like a node-based layout. Yeah, what kind of systems do we have here? What kind of systems do we want to have? Determines elements are touching or not. But also the forms might do that, I feel. Also, I'm missing Cublians, so I'm going to look for them because there is one important one I'm missing. All right. Good luck finding them. All right, I'm going to call... Well, let's create our root type here. System, and then we'll have a contiguous system. How do we want to do this? Store the amount and separations of elements determines when elements are touching or not. Contiguous system. A volume representing a mixture, or okay, one or more elements. What are the systems? Hull system. A volume representing one or more elements surrounded by a shell of one or more elements. This is where we'll get our balloon behavior. Hull system. It's also where we can create like a boat behavior if we want. How are we gonna determine like the visuals though? How do we determine the visuals of all this stuff? I don't know. Store the amounts and separations of elements determines when elements are touching or not. Contiguous system, volume representing one or more elements. Hull system, volume representing one or more elements surrounded by a shell of one or more elements. So here we can also do like volume calculations and get any touching elements. That way we could determine like how much it would float in whatever medium it's in. So like, how about some pseudocode, perhaps? Var. It could also be contained in multiple things, though, I feel. Hmm. Volume representing one or more elements. Arranged. Hmm. With varying positions. That wouldn't be contiguous, would it? Volume representing one or more elements with varying positions. Huh. Let me look at what contiguous means. What is a contiguous? Okay, contiguous is might actually work because it's like touching. It's not like everything is. It's not homogeneous, basically. I found it missing, but a contiguous system could represent a homogeneous system if it's configured in the right way. Found a missing cubulian. Well done. wonder how we're gonna process these also. Determines when elements are touching or not. Whether. Okay, we're not gonna go full pseudocode yet, actually. We have a form, we have a system. Store the amount of separations of elements, determines whether elements are touching or not, implements consequences for elemental behaviors. So what would this look like? Okay. We're not going to implement elements yet, but we're going to run through a loose example. Balloon. Okay. Let's say there is heat. Okay, we have a whole system, right? The shell is a contiguous system. The contents are a contiguous system. The shell is made up of, I don't know, like they wouldn't have rubber back then, so whatever like whatever hot air balloons were made of back then. Um did hot air balloons exist this far back? Or some sort of cloth, maybe? Fabric? I don't know. What are they made out of? Tarp? I don't know if they had tarp either. Like wind sail material, perhaps? Um yeah, that creates the shell, and then inside you have. Oh, but you know what? Would there be an opening in the whole system? How would we open it up? Actually, a fair question. Hmm. We might need a more like complicated system here. Why couldn't a contiguous system just represent all of this? If we're already keeping track of the varying positions and stuff. So I found the important guy and another one. Well, they're in a tight spot. You can get it. I believe in you. So I guess we have to decide where we would want to implement any sort of opening in it. Yeah. Jeez. Okay, we'll implement it in hull system. The hull can be partly opened on one side. So that could create like a balloon shape for us. Um, what else? What next? Right, we got to go through the example. So we could have a hull system with the balloon material shell. It could be partly opened in the bottom. Um, I guess as long as it's on one side, it shouldn't matter. But on the inside, we'll have air and heat. I don't know how I want to represent the energies yet. If I want to just, treat them as elements. But they would have to have like no density or no whatever. It's words, no mass. I think, um, or density, I guess. But yeah, those would both be in the whole system, and that would then send the signal to the elements of whether they're touching or not, and the energy too. Um, we're gonna need pressure as well. Oh my god. Oh my god. What the hell? Oh, this is becoming a this is becoming a system for sure. I think we can manage that. We can manage. This is going to be the most complicated part of the game. Oh my god. Uh, Contiguous system. I did it. I got them. Well done, Dino. Yeah. So the heat is in the balloon. It mixes with the oxygen or the air or whatever. Um, that causes the molecules to be like, whoa, whoa, what the hell's going on? And now they're like farther apart from each other because they're bouncing around like craziness. And that causes the pressure inside the balloon to expand. And now this balloon, the stretchy balloon, is taking up more volume, but its mass is still the same. So now, relative to the air outside the balloon, it has less density, but it's still pretty much the same weight as air. So what does that cause it to do? It's going to cause it to rise, um, which gets outputted either by the system or the element. And then depending on whatever form we're using, we can, do that. We can do that. So I guess if we had like a balloon tile, we could just make the tile disappear. We could do that. I mean, it would be like the same thing, right? If the whole system is moving up, right? Because that's how this works, then it would eventually just disappear. Might need to animate it in some way though. Would be nice. How would that apply? Could we have like a hull system in a weather form? Probably not. Probably wouldn't do that. So the important guy was so hard to make. So the cubes are small. It's for kids to know their tens. So think how hard it is to make a sword and eye patch one. That's true. The rigid body form would also rise up in its own way. Particle form, probably similar to the tile form. How could you have like particles of balloons, like balloon particles? I like this system though. Not everything has to be usable in every single situation. Like it doesn't have to make sense in every combination of these different things. I spell it. Yeah. The ideas are there, but turning it into words is a whole process. Inspirational quote. Stores the amount and separation of elements determines whether elements are touching or not. Okay. So these are like smaller scale physical calculations that are happening. Now we gotta make the elements. I think it's time. It's time to move on. This is where the interesting part happens. I think. Are we even gonna have like hierarchy within the elements? They might just be able to be resources. I'm not sure. I decided to make another mech. Nice. And how do we want states of matter to work? Are we gonna add those in the elements? Could. I'm sort of getting an idea now of how this system's gonna work. Let's say that we magically spawned lava in a balloon. Now the hull would be touching the contiguous system that's contained within the hull system, because again, they can be referencing other systems. They would collide, and unless what if there's like a core in the contiguous system? You know? Yeah, I don't know. You could have a hull system within another hull system, I suppose. No. Stores the amount and separations of elements. Maybe weather should be a form. I don't know. Do we even need forms? We do, because we could have a hull system that's on a rigid body form or a tile form. Barrel, or balloon, or barrel. Even though we might make the barrels rigid bodies, but it would be nice to have that functionality. A tree could have softer wood on the inside and then bark on the outside if we wanted to, you know? And we could use the layers. We could traverse the layers to figure out what else it's touching. This could work. Yeah. It's almost like gates. Think of it as like gates. So you have your balloon rigid body, um, the weather form or something tries to collide an element with it. So it'll go through the first layer, which will be the hull element thing, which would probably be another contiguous system, the hull itself. Think, what the hell am I saying? Um, yeah, it would. Let's say it's like rain or something. We can look at like the velocity of the. Oh my god. Oh my god. Rain would be another contiguous system. So let's say these systems, or we're checking for a collision between these systems. The volume representing one or more elements with varying positions. Okay, that's cool. Um, Obviously the rain has mass, so it's gonna go down. Um, so then we'll check for collisions using that. If the dot product of the down direction, you know, reaches whatever's inside of the hull. And if so, then we pass the collision check onto whatever's inside the hull with the modified, amount that's touching it. So let's say it's like an umbrella. Okay, let's say you were making an umbrella and we're representing that with a hull system where like 80% of the bottom is gone. So we're just seeing like the top of like a sphere. First of all, a lot of the air would go out of that. Um, I guess we don't have to worry about 3 dimensions though. So there's that to consider. Oh yeah, wait. God. Christ. This is going to be even more difficult to do in a 2-dimensional game because it's going to be inconsistent. We should probably do the calculations in 3 dimensions. And just figure it so we can have like that functionality. Um yeah, the umbrella, let's say the rain comes down, it's going to collide with a lot more of the inside of it, the rain that is, than, in a balloon, which is just a small opening in the bottom. Holy hell. This is crazy. Okay, element. Again, I don't know if we're gonna have to inherit at any point, actually, with an element, which is interesting to think about. We'd have to like make tiles for every element or something. I don't know. Yes, I guess we could do that. Jeez. This is a lot. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff to do. Why would we have to inherit at any point? For specific reactions, right. But those could be controlled with variables, probably. Like, solubility, or we could just reference other elements that would dissolve it. Like one superclass to control every part of the element. And that way, any element, once we add a new functionality to all elements, could operate in that same way given the right conditions, which would create a more dynamic outcome, I feel. Okay. I suppose we can do that. I thought we were going to have to do more to make the system work. Huh. The element is going to... What is the functionality of each instance? Can't find an image or video to reference, so time to wing it. Good luck. You can do it. Also, I'm going to run the ad break now because it is the hour. The hour has passed. I'll be back in 3 minutes. Clicking the button. The button has been clicked. Is it going to go? Okay, I will be back in 3 minutes. All right, we're back. So I'm actually wondering if the velocity should happen in the system instead. What if they inherit from like the same thing? Or what if okay, elements will output those changes per volume, systems will output those changes per system. So per defined volume basically. So it'll combine everything. It'll add everything up and send it out to the form. So implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Let's be a little more specific about this terminology. Um, implements consequences for systemic behaviors, for elemental behaviors as... Okay, hold on. Stores the amount and separations of elements, determines whether elements are touching or not. Compounds, no. Yes, no, yes, yes. Compounds the behaviors of contained elements to apply to the whole system. So now this is like the net result, or in other words, the net result of all contained elemental reactions. Okay, we are getting somewhere with this. I've also decided that I think the form should start the initial propagation. I'm describing it now as a propagation because it is going to be like a hierarchical sort of physical interaction here. So, because, you know, systems can contain other systems. Implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Still got to think about how I want to do the visuals. Also propagates, or also initiates collision checks on root level forms. So any forms that are like at the top, so like our balloon on our, you know, tile form, it's going to then like look at the weather, look at any other tiles surrounding it, and then it will like initialize, you know, rain or oxygen or whatever it may be. You might also want a way to initialize everything, given like a what's the word? Like pre-simulate it a little bit. So given like a developed atmosphere with a balloon in it, you know, it should already have some level of air in it when it's first spawned, I would imagine. I would imagine that to be the case. So maybe we could have some sort of simulate function, and then we could have like time as a, or like magnitude as like a thing. I don't know. Factor, perhaps. I'm working on the legs, and it's well something. Anyway, I'm gonna hop off to watch vids while I build. Bye. All right. Thanks for stopping in, Dino. Take care. Good luck with uh the Cublians. Still know how to pronounce it. Also, I get my cast off tomorrow. All right. Congrats. Yeah, take care. Okay, so we have our forms ready to be released. Indeed. See you later. Store the amounts and separations of elements, determines whether elements are touching. Okay, we had the systems, now the elements. Where do energies come into all this? Could that be part of the system, maybe? Okay, I feel like energies should apply to elements. And then with like the fire, for example, that could have like an initial energy level or some sort of the pre-simulation. I don't know. Wait, what is our old definition of elements? Representations of different physical systems. Changes their behavior. So maybe the energies should be stored in the systems instead. No, we probably want to store them on the elements so we could have all the reactions take place there. But wasn't there something about like having a default amount? Jeez. I'm thinking of like a separation, another separation here. Substances. It may not be necessary to create like an entire other thing, actually. Determines behavior based off of elements it touches, energies it's experiencing, um, energies it contains, determines behavior based off of elements it touches, energies it contains. Okay. No, those might be the only two. Determines behavior based off of elements it touches and energies it contains. Behaviors. Behaviors are hard coded and include things like conversion to different elements. Um, Conversions to different elements. Oh, but then do we want like a gaseous and a liquid in a solid form. I don't know. Behaviors are the outputs. Okay. Conversion to different elements. So we could do either. So with the example of fire, the temperature becomes low enough, it can turn to ash. But then with lava, if the temperature becomes low enough, it can become the solid version of itself, which could be like stone or something. Behaviors are hard coded and include things like conversion to different elements. Indeed, indeed. How would we define that though in the code? For like fire, for example. How would we define that on a resource? We might just want to code all of this stuff in, to be honest. I don't know. Because again, with converting like fire to ash, when it is below a certain temperature, how would that be determined, you know? It would be kind of difficult to do that in a resource. We would need like some sort of custom export thing. We should probably code these behaviors in. I know I'm saying behaviors are hard coded, but like, we should code every individual element, not use the resources. Probably what we want to do. But we'll still have some sort of standardization. Maybe we'll have like a struct that keeps track of all of those like universal things. So we can get like the best of both worlds there. Yeah, conversion to different elements. Um melting and melting slash freezing slash boiling. Melting slash boiling. And what's the opposite of melting? Freezing. But what's the opposite of boiling? Precipitating? What is the opposite of boiling? Cooling? No. What is the reverse of condensation? Oh. Temperatures? Wait. No. Triggers. Okay, they're all going to be triggers, in a sense, in a manner of speaking. Conversion to different elements, melting slash boiling and freezing slash condensation. Uh, we will want to test if they're like colliding with other elements. Conversion to different elements, melting and boiling, freezing and condensation. State changes. There were other things. What is dissolution? In chemistry. Okay. That would just be conversion to different elements, right? Because matter cannot be created. Most people don't know this. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed, okay? Unless we're talking about like Hawking radiation. I don't know. There's like there's probably an exception. Like the Hawking radiation, it like turns into or it turns into. Wait a minute. Yeah, I feel like if you're emitting photons, well, that would be reducing your temperature. But aren't you also just like there's another thing? I don't know. Matter might be able to be destroyed. I feel like that could happen. Like that's what Hawking radiation is, right? Because it dissolves over time. I don't even know if this is considered like modern science anymore. I saw this in a video like 7 years ago. Maybe. Literally, it does not matter in this situation because we're not going to worry about it in our system. Conversion to different elements, state changes. What else? Oh, velocity. Right. So what direction the whole volume of the element is moving, so it'll still have some, you know, definitional overlaps there. Velocity and no. Velocity impulses. How about just so I can, you know, specify that's, you know, what we're talking about. Not the velocity itself, but the impulse. It might also keep track of its own velocity. I don't know. Velocity and impulses. Conversion to different elements, state changes. Velocity and impulses. Radiation and energy transfer. And then that's enough examples. That's fine. So we are going to need a bit of an elemental hierarchy, I suppose. So every element is going to be coded, basically, which is fine. I'm fine with that. It's going to be a lot of scripts, but it'll be worth it. It's necessary. Okay, form, system, element. Let me add something else really quick. Okay, the element attributes will just have an element with, you know, a pre-configured temperature. Yeah, we're gonna get like a whole thing going on here. It's gonna be similar to like a UI script, actually, in its construction. Form, system, oh my god. Oh my god. What the hell? What am I doing? This is too much, guys. Alright, is it time for examples or am I forgetting something? Energies, right. Well, energies, I mean, those can probably be included in the elements. Like, there'll be values written onto them. So elements are going to be instances, basically. Is the idea here. And then we can use them however we want. So if we want to put that instance on just like a template that we can reuse across all tiles of a certain profile, then that's what we can do. Or we can do it per node. We can use a new instance on every node. Whatever. Honestly, do I need to do examples? Yes. Initiates collision checks on root level forms. Balloon node form. That's wrong. Because now we have to include the systems in this. Energies it contains. Right. Right. Okay. Elements. Store energies. If we're going to have energy transfer them, the tiles will need to store probably each element individually, I would imagine. Or at least the energies. So maybe we need like an element instance or something. We'll figure it out. Balloon node form overlaps campfire tile. Or rigid body form contains hull system. Rigid body form is touching weather and campfire tile. Weather form contains, and let me specify that here. Weather form contains. Do we want to collide systems or do we want to collide elements? We'll probably collide systems and then elements. So they'll have like their own separate things going on. Weather form contains contiguous system with I'm just going to do one example because this is cumbersome to write all of this out. Weather form contains contiguous system with oxygen element. Tile form contains. Oh. See. I see what's happening here. I think. What? There would be two tile forms. There would be the campfire wood, and then the fire. They'd be touching each other because the layers, the layerings. And then the campfire would be touching the ground. Oh god. We will figure all of this stuff out. It's going to happen. Maybe there can only be, maybe we could limit every tile to only have one system. One system per tile. But a system can be like a whole thing of things and stuff. So I don't know. Rigid body form contains hull system. Rigid body form is touching weather form and tile form. Weather form contains contiguous system with oxygen element. Tile form contains fire element. Contains contiguous system with fire element. With high heat. Rigid body form is deduced to be touching both. Wait. Collision is initiated between rigid body form's hull system shell. Rigid body form's hull system shell. Oh my god. Writing all this out is like super impractical, but we're implementing in a way. Collision is initiated between rigid body form's hull system shell, weather form's contiguous system contents, and tile form's contiguous system contents. The contents being mixed are oh shit. Don't actually know. Wait, oxygen. What? And collision is initiated between rigid body form's hull system shell. No, hull system. Weather form's contiguous system. And tile form's contiguous system. We're creating a bit of new stuff here. The density behavior is specified. The density behavior of the oxygen element is specified. What? We're assuming it's completely submerged. Collision check on hull system begins. It is submerged in weather form and thus collides with its oxygen. It is also touching tile form and thus collides with its fire. The fire collides with... Hold on. Let's get rid of this part for a second. It is touching tile form and thus collides with its fire. The fire collides with the oxygen in the hull system contents. The fire transfers its temperature. Yeah, but with actual hot air balloons, it's like the air or the vapors are going to the balloon, right? Maybe not. I think it would be mostly conduction, but we could represent both. The fire transfers its temperature to the oxygen in the hull system. We're going to say transfers its heat. This causes the oxygen element to change its density behavior to be lower. How would we determine whether the balloon expands or not? This pressure force is exerted on the shell element as a wait. This causes the shell elements Oh my god. Tension to increase. I'm using every single one of my neurons here. This causes the shell element's tension to increase. The hull, what the hell? The rigid body form. Oh, what? It's always all the ideas in the brain and you simply can't structure it out properly. It's both right now. I do not have every part of this thought of in my brain. And then when I think of each next step, I have to turn it into words. Pressure force exerted on the shell element. This causes the shell element's tension to increase. Something should happen at this point. This is the shell element's tension. The volume of a hull system should be able to change, right? It's causes the shell element's tension to increase, which causes... I should write this as a bullet point list, which causes the hull system to increase. Hull system's volume to increase. Is this when it like propagates the behavior? Compounds the behaviors of contained elements to apply to the whole system. Shell elements tension to increase. Should they be the same? Like, should we use a single object to determine the behaviors of the elements and the hulls? Use the same kind of element or the same kind of object. It causes the hull system's volume to increase. Is there any reason we couldn't use tension? Because that would imply a pulling force, which would also increase the size. But it would have to be, like, exerted equally over it. Okay, for now we're just going to say which causes the hull system's tension to increase. This tension implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Causes the hull's tension increase. Okay, instead of tension, we're going to say the pressure force is exerted on the shell element. This causes the shell element's volume to increase. So volume for both of these. This causes the oxygen element to change its density behavior to be lower. The pressure force is exerted on the shell element. This causes the shell element's volume to... Or how about, Okay, volume to increase, density to decrease. We can use those interchangeably here, which causes the whole system's volume to increase as well. The increase in volume. Please check for these ones do collisions as well, right? The increase in volume on the hull system causes it to have lower density than the surrounding weather system. But I'm actually going to call it contiguous system of the weather form, which causes the hull system volume to increase. The increase in volume on the hull system causes it to have lower density than the surrounding contiguous system of the weather form. This applies a velocity force on the hull system. Okay, I'm mixing up the capitalization here. Fine. I just need to go through this entire thing in my head. Oh my god. This applies a velocity force on the hull system. In parentheses, behavior. Rigid body form receives the velocity force behavior and causes the rigid body to rise. Okay, this is necessary information to create this outcome. So this would actually happen over a series of multiple collisions because it would have to like heat up and increase the volume first. Yeah, so basically what would happen is the forms would send a collision signal down to the appropriate systems, which would then send collisions down to the elements, which would then respond with certain behaviors, which would get propagated up to the systems, which may or may not transform the behaviors in some way, which would then get propagated up to the forms, which would then implement the consequences for these different behaviors, these different values being outputted. So I think we have an actual working system now. The visuals is like the last thing I'm not sure about. Maybe the form can handle that. Implements consequences for elemental behaviors, also initiates collision checks on root level forms. It can't handle everything though. Is the thing. Maybe the systems could do that. Consequences for elemental behaviors also initiates collision checks on root level forms. Jeez. It's almost like the systems would have to create their own visualization. But again, that depends on the form. Like if we have a balloon somewhere, how do we create the visuals for that? Like a balloon in tile form versus a balloon in rigid body form. We could probably handle the visualization in the forms, I would say. But again, we need examples for that. Ideally, we could show the balloon expanding, although we don't have to. So we kind of are trying to decide at this point what we want to visualize and what we don't want to visualize, while also how we're going to do it. Another question. Influence consequences for elemental behaviors. Okay, I think we will add it here, including visual consequences. How would that work given all of our other current systems? We could have a scene for a node tile entity. I don't know what the hell I'm calling them. That could have a sprite with a balloon. Implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Rigid body form. It would have to be a rigid body. Wait. Including visual consequences. Well, then we might need some kind of inheritance. But these wouldn't be nodes themselves. They would be, like, tied to the nodes. Huh. Yeah, we need a reference to the node in the case of the rigid body forms. I guess the same thing for the particle forms. And what would the forms have? Implements consequences for elemental behaviors. Initiates collision checks on root level forms. So forms would probably have systems within them. Yeah. So like a rigid body form could have a balloon system or a hull system that looks like a balloon. Then how do we apply the visuals to that? Oh my god. What if we did it in the element? Or something. Like, let's say one of our rocks heats up. On one of our tiles. We could write some sort of GPU value and then, like, represent that. And then if it transforms, which would be just another behavioral output, then we do something. No, then we destroy the tile and replace it with another one, but then we have to, like, add the form back somehow. Maybe tile forms could just be instantiated per tile profile. But then they would need systems attached to them, which have unique contents of different elements. Yeah, if we have barrel tiles, we would have to do that. So if we wanted to keep doing it this way, or if we wanted to, like, not have to think about this as much, we would basically say that tile forms all have fixed systems, basically. And only if it, like, transforms or something does it then actually convert to something else, whether that be you know, a rigid body form or another tile form, which could be attached to the tile profile. And then everything else beyond that could just be like shaders. So could we have a barrel tile form at that point? I guess we could do it that way. The form would take care of that. Hmm. How would we keep track of the temperature is another question. All of this data has to be saved and loaded somehow. I mean, we could store it as CPU data, the temperature. That could work. That would also work as GPU data. It would just modify the shader. Which, like, at this point, all the tiles would be sharing kind of like the same shader. What if it applies to, like, a gas tile? I don't know. No, every tile can have a different kind of shader. We can do that. And then if it transfers, like, if a tile melts, we could change the tile, but it could have the same form. Right? I hope so. Oh my god. Maybe we could have, like, forms or system. It would have the same system. Wait, no. We could change the tile form, and it would have the same system. What the hell? Change the thing and make it work. That's what we're gonna do. If we have a rock tile, it melts into lava. Forms apply to tiles. Well, we haven't really decided how we want to connect the forms to the tiles themselves. I would say doesn't matter if we keep the same tile form or we make a new one at that point. As long as the system is the same. No, even then the system would change. Different Oh my god, different profiles can have different systems. Systems need to be able to convert into other systems. What? Jeez. God. Okay. Maybe run through another example in my head. So, we have the stone tile for the rocks. There's like fire particles or something that it's colliding with. Propagate that to the system. That increases the heat behavior of the system. We set that as GPU data or CPU both potentially. On the tile form, we do that in the tile form. That is part of its implementation, setting the CPU and GPU data. The amounts and separations of elements. We'd have to have the amount go down. Yeah. Wait. Form. You know what? I don't know. I don't know. Oh my goodness. Whenever an event happens, we create the form and its systems. We would have to be checking like every frame to see if it melts or not. No, only when it collides with other elements. Only when the heat is transferred, which would be all the time because of the weather form. So there would need to be collisions happening like all the time, basically. Yeah, that would be awful. That would be really slow, not performant. We could check them very slowly. Which, if we're talking about something like rust, like if you have a copper tile and it only updates that tile like, once every minute, that could work. And then we could, again, with like the system calculations, we could have like the amount or the time parameter in the function to change the amount it's reacting with it. We could do that. And then when it collides with something like fire or like a particle or something moving faster, then we can do a more more granular collision check with like the weather. So we could have like the oxygen if we were gonna ignite the tile or something, or have the fire spread. Okay. So now I'm kind of like not associating the form instances with the tile. So like every frame we could, or every physics update, we could calculate like three tiles and then just scan like left and right, then down, every update, like atmosphere checks. And then when something more chaotic happens, we'll do a more granular check. We'll start like doing it every frame for that tile as well. But then for the conversions, well, we'd have to store the system still. Oh my god. We would create the form like every update for the tiles. So we make a form, we associate it with a tile, then we can read back the CPU data to initialize the systems. Okay, I feel like I have enough information to figure out how we're going to attach it to the actual tiles themselves, but still the visualization I'm not sure about, so I could try and run through a tile example, even though I still don't have all the information. Okay, so maybe we're doing a form check on a tile. We create a form for a tile, we read back the temperature, it's really, really hot. We propagate, we initialize the system. So let's say it's just rocks, so that would just be a contiguous system of like the limestone element. We apply the temperature to the system, the element, whatever needs it. The element propagates the collision back up, and it basically says, hey, we are now like in a liquid state, at which point we could convert to just like a puddle tile, but use like the same data, or use like We're going to use something, basically. No. We would have to use, like, something to keep track of that, though. What? If our data structures were better, this would be easier. We could create a tile for every puddle variant, but we probably don't want to do that. I think the real answer here is just improve our data structures or allow different kinds of data to save and load. We could store an RID. We could add integer values and then store resource IDs. No, but they'd have to be instances. We could store the ID. We could have some sort of collection and then store the ID. We could already store it as a float probably, but we could store the ID there. That could work. We'd have to store like all the information though. Or we could use a shader. Right? Because we just want to change the look of the tile. But no, we'd also want to change the collision. So we probably would want to change the whole tile. Okay. Damn it, never mind. Yeah. We would need to be able to store these systems or store something in the tiles themselves. Pretty sure. I don't know if there's any other way we could do this. Again, unless we create a tile for every kind of element puddle in the game, which, you know, I don't want to do that. Wait, weren't there terrain variants? Wasn't that a thing? Or like tile variants? I wonder if we could do something there. Just change the visual representation of the tile. No, we need to change the collision as well. We could use resource RIDs though, and then save that. They don't have to be instances. It just needs to be something we can like set at runtime. Okay, well, assuming I'd have to like concede that and add integers at least as like a form of support for this. Well then, when the temperature and the CPU data is high enough, we change the tile and specify some new profile. So the tile profiles will get moved into CPU data, most likely. I guess that's fine. Or it could get associated to a different tile form. RID or ID or something that we can just reuse between playthroughs. Yeah. Maybe we keep the tile profiles. I don't know. So we would switch it to like a puddle tile, and then in the GPU data, set the ID for the new form, which would be still a tile form. Maybe a new system? No, even that won't work. Again, this is just a matter of how we correlate the tiles to the forms. Okay. No, so wait, we change the tile. We keep the GPU ID for the form the same. What? No, we still need the temperature though. Okay, it won't be an instance. The form can't be an instance. Oh my god. Okay, we could have something that fetches our form later on, whether it be the form itself or some like resource. Okay, we keep it the same. We keep the idea that references to that thing the same, and we just continue running the checks. So the visuals are changed, right? We change it to the puddle tile. We set the right shader parameters, the color of the elements involved, the hue as a float, saturation value, RGB. I probably want to do RGB instead. Combine all the colors. Get the thing there. Or you know what? The color could be a behavior. Yes. That would be a better way to do it because, you know, in real life chemistry, that's kind of how it works. Yeah, tile form could propagate that, adjust the GPU and CPU data, which are the things that get adjusted every iteration in memory. We would change it to the liquid. We would get the color, set that in the GPU data. Then we'd have a melted puddle with the same form attached to it through the CPU data, which we could then use to do other calculations. And if we wanted to, we could re-solidify it back into a rock. Okay. Oh my god. What the hell? Every tile profile might be able to have like a default form. Yeah. Or maybe some of them will. And then ones without a form, I don't know, you'd have to like specify it somehow. Okay, this system is coming together. Likewise for like the rigid body form, what would we do? Christ, I don't know. We would also need to map some of the elements to different tiles if we wanted to convert to like other solid ones. But that's how we could do the visualization for the tiles, I think. For the rigid bodies. I don't know how reusable I want to make all of this like behavior. Okay, let's say we place the balloon down as a scene. We can start from there. We have a rigid body with some sort of script attached. It wouldn't be the rigid body form though. It could be some sort of attachment thing. Maybe. Yeah, some way to attach it again, which should be easy to decide on. I could literally make a type called like form instance. Form attachment that just keeps track of a form. And it would have to have like a sprite, and then the sprite would have to expand. Although the thing with that is that, like, what if we want to change or transmute the element on, the balloon? What if we had a rolling barrel? How would we do that? How do we make a barrel? Damn it. Would that work? What? What is happening? They might have to be like their own system or something. Contiguous system, whole system. Yeah. Mm. Excuse me. Okay, obviously we had a barrel that's going to contain like a contiguous or a hull system, with the outside being like wood and metal, and then the inside being like water or something or whatever we want inside the barrel. Okay, and then we could like apply all the rigid body forces and stuff. It'd be great. But what if we change the wood to metal? What if we make the wood metal? Shader, right? Use a shader, the system doesn't change. If the system changes sufficiently, then we can decide to do something about it. If the metal is dissolved beyond 50%, okay, the barrel will break. It'll turn into like a broken variant or something. Uh, and then it just releases the contents either as a tile. It determines what it wants to do at that point. But what does that? I guess the form could do that. Yeah, maybe. Perhaps. We need some way to spawn elements. Consequences for elemental behaviors. Okay. Yeah, so it would spill out onto the ground. We could do that as another... We'd probably do that as a tile form. Or maybe a particle form. Maybe. Punch my microphone. Although the thing is, what if we have fire and then we have another tile form and then they're like mixed together? Kind of makes me want to turn it into a rigid body form. Damn it. I don't know. It's like we need multiple tile forms. Or no, we could have a single form for like elements, like fire, stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna have to, unless we want to store everything in the GPU data down to like the combinations, or the CPU data down to like the combinations of elements within the container. Unless we want to do that, then we'll have to make like some concessions. Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing right now for the element system and like the CPU and GPU data. Like we're storing the amount of electricity, stuff like that. Uh, so maybe the elements should not be able to mix on the tiles, but they can collide if they're adjacent. And something will happen. Okay, that sounds like a fair concession. We're not going to be able to get it exactly correct. Okay, this is already super cool. This is ought to be a super cool gameplay system if we can implement it correctly. This is going to be difficult. This is actually going to be difficult to implement, all this stuff. Maybe not. I don't know. It's what it is, you know. Um yeah, and then for the rigid body ones, like if it's a barrel, if it gets transmuted into some other object, we just change the scene. Um what else could happen? Like if the barrel burns, we could look through the systems and see that there's, a fire system or a contiguous system containing fire on it. We could just add that to the node, like on top of it, and then have those collide every frame. I think, and they would combine visual elements that way. Like we could have a particle form for that, probably, or something. And then when it's burnt enough, we just destroy the barrel. Like we Q free, maybe add a particle effect for it being destroyed. And then we spawn in like ash or something. And like if it spawns on top of a tile and it can't like go into the ash. Yeah. Hmm. Like if there's already something there, we could do a collision check and just like move it over until there is a valid space. We could do that, I guess. We have multiple layers to work with. But you can't, I don't think you're going to be able to have more than one element on a single tile. So we just have to like move it over until it works. And then if we don't have enough space after moving it over a bunch, we're just going to delete it. This is going to take so long. This is going to be so much work. We're going to be working on this for like 5 months, guys. I hope you know that. Um, yeah, it seems like there are, now with this system, there are ways to accomplish the things I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah, like okay, so the barrel could use a shader, so we could swap out the elements. The barrel is a just a shape. It has a form associated with it. Be a rigid body form, which has a hull system in it, which does a thing. Yeah. So back to the hot air balloon example. You'd have a hot air balloon scene with all of the systems configured in the scene. We'll figure out the default elements somehow. And then as soon as it spawns in, it'll start colliding with the atmosphere. Again, probably at a slower pace, but not as slow as the tiles. Who knows? Maybe like every 16 physics updates or every 8 physics updates or something for every node. That might be more performant. Um, yeah, it'll collide. Then we'll have to like do something. We'll have to do a thing. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, how to represent the visuals. What if the barrel expands? Well, no, the tension would be too high. It would just break. The barrel will just explode. That's how you could have like an exploding barrel. But with the balloon, it would stretch out. But if you transmuted the barrel into a different, oh my god. Okay, every node could have like its own. Okay, a single scene could be made up of multiple nodes, each with their own rigid body forms. The balloon could be a single thing. All right, the size can increase. The size of the sprite or the rigid body or whatever the hell can increase. It's fine. It's literally fine. Oh my god. What about like an arrow or something? That wouldn't even necessarily be a rigid body. How about a tree, like a tree log? If that gets set on fire, again, we do the thing with the particles spawning on top of it. Uh, if the volume increases, we can just increase the size of the sprite or the 3D model. We'd also increase the size of the collider. Whichever. Um, what else? And then how would this apply to the dragon? The dragon would also need like its own thing going on. It has to interact with like the physics systems. Does every enemy have its own script? If so, we could probably code the interactions in, but it might limit the amount we could do, the amount of stuff that could happen. Also, like the pirate ship, just like a hull. It's a hull within itself. Be a hull system with the top being open. Or like one side of it or something. What if the ship blows up? What would happen then? What if there's something inside of it? What if there's something inside of one of the barrels? Well, you wouldn't see it because it's a barrel. But what if there's like a bucket? What if you had a bucket rigid body? Or something of the like. It would have to like have its own shader. That's what would have to happen. Yeah. It's just I don't know if like we're gonna the question I'm trying to answer is are we gonna have to like make a whole other kind of form every time we want to add a new object to the game? Gotta be something reusable we can use. Yeah, you could turn the barrel. You should be able to turn the barrel into a balloon by changing like transmuting the material from like wood to cloth or whatever is used in balloons. What do they use in balloons? Um, then just how to visualize that. I mean, we could increase the size, like the bare minimum we could do. How did they do this in Scribble Knots? I guess is what I want to know. I'd at least be able to do this with like resources or something, like a profile, some some thing, something that we'll do a thing, and it'll work. That's the plan. That is the plan. Oh geez, this is like the hardest thing to solve, actually. And just trying to anticipate all of the different situations. Like, okay, with the hot air balloon, we just increase the scale. That'll work fine. With the barrel example, not exactly. Well, I mean, it would. It would work fine. I mean, honestly, it would be fine. But I just know that there's going to be a situation where it's not fine, basically. If we use 3D meshes, we can do some sort of calculation, perhaps. What other kinds of rigid bodies would we have? Like a boulder, for example. What if that boulder melts? Well, we could manage that. If it gets hot, just adjust the shader parameter. We turn it into uh foam or something that would expand. We just increase the scale. Uh yeah. What about for like an enemy? What chemical interactions would they have? Like a human, would it just be like flesh and bone in some sort of contiguous system? It'd have to be a hull system, but I don't think we could represent a human. I don't think we're gonna worry about like representing the full anatomy of humans. So I might just do a hull system with like flesh as the shell, and then on the contents we could have like bone or something. And then just apply shaders as needed. We could turn a human. We could replace the flesh with like, I don't know, gold. We could turn someone to, or stone. We could turn someone to stone. That could be an upgrade. But how? How though? Incorporate it in the shader somehow. I guess. We need some sort of like unified system here. I think. Instance thing. Whatever. Instance uniforms are gonna save my life. I think with all of this. Yeah, we could apply different textures. Oh, wait, we can't actually. I lied. We can't do that. It's like the one thing we can't do, actually. Oh no. Also gonna break the batching. RimWorld does a similar thing, I think. I don't know how they actually program it though. We could have like a form integrator. Form visualizer. No, probably integrator would be better. So we could like connect the rigid body. And then we could have a sprite, then connect like some sort of event or function or something. And it'll attempt to set different shader parameters. And if the parameter is there, it'll set it. So we could like set the modulate values as like instance uniforms, probably. Yeah. But changing like the textures themselves would be more difficult. Yeah. 3D batching is still a thing in Godot, I'm pretty sure. So I'd like to use the same materials if possible. Oh my god. I guess we could also give it a new material. We're adding this. We're adding this as a thing. Form integrator handles the connection between nodes and forms. What I'm gonna say for now. So we could do this stuff with shader parameters and like adjust the scale. Stuff like that. I think. Jeez. What do we have for the enemy script right now? What's going on here? I'm not implementing yet. I'm not doing that yet. Oh my god, we're gonna worry about that on Wednesday. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll like put this off for a little bit. Or like work on it in chunks. Gonna have to test a lot. This is gonna take a while. This is gonna be a large system. Indeed, indeed. And we're gonna have to adjust some of our C code. Sounds. I guess we could add that to the integrator. Or, we could use these types as integrators as well. We just wouldn't be able to have the common form thing here, which might be okay. I don't know. No, because we want to be able to collide other forms with each other. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, so for the enemy, what's going on? Integrate forces. So it calls the tree, I'm assuming. We could add an integrator onto every enemy scene, maybe? No, it'd have to like be incorporated into this script. So we could have like a rigid body form. Okay. Enemy integrator. We could have enemy integrator, object integrator, which could work with the balloon, the thing, the other thing. Or maybe we'll use the same for all rigid bodies. So just node integrator, rigid body integrator, and we'll add that to the scene. Get the 3-dimensional version. But then with multiple rigid bodies like this, oh my god. Don't know. No. Dragon integrator, rigid body integrator, rigid bodies integrator. Then adjust shader parameters on them. Oh my god. I think that we have barely enough to start working on this. This is gonna be Quite the endeavor. This is the visualization is going to be difficult, but the form system element, all that stuff, all the logic is resolved. The integrators, we're just going to need to standardize, really. Standardize shader parameters, standardize, yeah, shader parameters, scaling, layering of different nodes, attaching nodes to other nodes. Do as much as we can. Yeah. And we're going to have to probably change a lot of things in the game. Change a lot of the pre-existing systems. Like, we might have to use some new type for every rigid body. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we probably have enough. I'll probably think about it a little bit more off stream, but I think I am going to end it here. So thank you everyone who stopped in. Thank you, Dino. And thank you, New Boss Bro. I will be live again Wednesday. I don't know if I'm going to keep working on implementation or if I'm gonna do some more planning. I'll figure it out. It'll be quite the interesting time. Definitely do some thinking off stream. And yeah, I gotta work on making more shorts for the marketing and get 2 views per short. No. Well, yes, actually, that will happen. But I'm never gonna stop grinding, so it's fine. All right, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you everyone who stopped in. I'll be back on Wednesday. Take care. Drink water. I'll see you later. Thanks again, everyone. Bye bye.